What if I told you that you're not truly alive in the way you've been taught to believe, and that what you call life might actually be a dream happening after death? Pause for a moment and let that land. You've been conditioned since birth to believe that this is the real world, a solid, linear experience with beginnings and endings. Birth marks the start, death, the finish line. But what if that entire structure is inverted? What if what you're experiencing right now is not the starting point of your soul's journey, but a continuation, a corridor through something much deeper? Every ancient spiritual tradition whispers the same truth, if you're willing to listen closely. That this physical realm, the one you're walking through, working in, struggling within, is not the real world. It's a projection, a classroom, a maze of symbols and lessons that masks the actual nature of your existence. And here's the strange part. You already know this, somewhere deep inside. Have you ever had that eerie moment where time feels bent, or you suddenly feel like you're watching your life from outside of yourself? Maybe in a dream, or during a random quiet moment, you sense that this entire experience is somehow off, like a movie you've seen before but can't quite place. Those aren't glitches. They're clues, echoes of a deeper truth, trying to surface. Wisdom schools throughout history have pointed toward this very idea, that what we call life is a state of forgetfulness, and what we fear as death is actually a return. In the ancient teachings of Tibetan Buddhism, there's a concept called the Bardo, an in-between state where consciousness floats, untethered, confused, uncertain of its reality. The Tibetans believed that the Bardo wasn't just something that occurred after your heart stops beating. They believed we are in it right now, that this world is the Bardo, and the souls within it are wandering, half asleep, trying to remember who and what they truly are. Ancient Egypt held a similar view. They spoke of the Duat, not simply as a place of judgment after death, but as a mirror realm where consciousness must navigate trials and illusions before it can ascend to a truer state. Hieroglyphic inscriptions in tombs describe our waking life as the world of shadows, a realm of dim reflections, not reality itself. These weren't poetic metaphors. To them, this was a precise map of where we are right now. The physical realm was never the destination. It was a passageway. And then there are the Gnostics, early Christian mystics, who were silenced for speaking too much truth. They taught that the material world was a prison, a carefully constructed illusion designed to bind divine consciousness to a cycle of forgetting. They claimed that what we call life is actually death, and that only by awakening while still within this dream can you escape the trap and return to divine reality. Let that sink in. Across cultures, across centuries, from Egypt to Tibet to the deserts of early Christianity, the same core idea repeats. This isn't the beginning. This isn't the real. This is a reflection, a veil, a temporary dream state. So what exactly is this place you call home? Look around you. Everything seems solid. Your body feels real. The ground is beneath your feet. Time ticks forward. But even modern science will tell you that what we perceive as solid matter is almost entirely empty space, that atoms are 99.99% void. That color is just vibration, and form is merely perception filtered through limited senses. When you touch something, you're not actually touching it. You're feeling the resistance of electromagnetic fields. Think about that. You're interacting with an interface, not with reality itself. And just like in a dream, everything responds to your beliefs, your perceptions, your focus, more than you realize. How many times have you looked back on an experience and thought, that feels like a dream now? Why do certain moments, certain days, feel so vivid, while others fade like mist? Why does time seem to stretch or collapse depending on your emotional state? Why do you sometimes feel like you're playing a role, smiling when you're empty, nodding when you're lost, acting like a version of yourself that doesn't quite feel true? Because this is a dream, a waking dream. Not in the sense that it's fake or meaningless, but in the sense that it's symbolic, temporary, and profoundly constructed for your evolution. You're not just living in a world, you're walking through a story, a script designed by you, for you, with challenges, patterns, and archetypes crafted to trigger deep remembrance. But as long as you believe this is the real world, as long as you stay attached to the illusion, you keep looping through the same amnesia, lifetime after lifetime. What would change if you truly realized you were already in the afterlife? That your body is not the vessel of life, but a garment worn in a dimension between dimensions? That you're not on the path toward truth, you're inside the test itself? Would you treat your suffering differently? Would you speak to others with more compassion? Would you question the systems you've blindly trusted? Would you stop waiting for heaven after death and start seeking the heaven that's veiled right here? This is the inversion, the great misunderstanding. You've been taught that death is the end, that what comes next is unknowable, that consciousness is a byproduct of the brain, and when the body dies, so does the you. But what if that's the greatest lie of all? What if the body is simply a terminal, and consciousness is the signal, never born, never dying, just shifting from screen to screen? There's a reason people who've had near-death experiences often say that the other side felt more real than this one, that the colors were brighter, that time didn't exist, that they didn't want to come back. Because the veil was lifted, even if only for a moment, and in that moment, they remembered. And here's the haunting part. When they returned, many of them described this world, this life, as the dream, the shadow, the imitation. So the question is no longer, what happens after you die? The real question is, what happens when you realize you've already died, and this is the afterlife you're inside of now? If this world is the dream, who are you within it? And more importantly, who might you become when you finally awaken? This is the truth they don't want you to know. Not because it's scary, but because once you see it, you can never unsee it. The illusion begins to unravel, the loops begin to collapse. And the self you thought was you starts to dissolve into something much vaster, something eternal, not a person, not a body, but pure awareness, navigating a dream world disguised as reality, searching, not for life, but for remembrance. You're not waiting to die, you're waiting to wake up. What if I told you that the world you see, feel, and interact with every day isn't the real world at all, but a dreamlike shadow crafted from the echoes of something far greater, far truer, and far more eternal? That this very life, the one you wake up to every morning, with its routines, relationships, struggles, and fleeting joys, might actually be a veil pulled gently over your eyes, soft enough to feel real, but persistent enough to keep you from remembering what lies beyond it. This isn't some modern theory. It's not a new idea born of digital age minds desperate for meaning. In fact, it's one of the oldest teachings humanity has ever recorded. Long before we had microscopes, space travel, or quantum physics, ancient civilizations whispered among themselves a secret most of us still aren't ready to hear, that we are already living in the in-between. Not quite alive, not truly dead, wandering inside a realm that mimics reality but hides its source. Take the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Most people think it's a text meant only for guiding souls through what happens after we die. But if you read it closely, if you let the metaphors fall away and look at it like a mirror, you begin to see something extraordinary. It doesn't just describe the dead, it describes you, right now. It speaks of beings who wander confused, unable to recognize the nature of their own minds. They try to touch the world around them, only to find their hands pass through what they thought was solid. They call out to loved ones, only to find no one sees or hears them. They try to interact with a reality that no longer acknowledges them, not realizing the reality itself was always a projection, not truth, but a reflection of truth. Now pause. Think about your own life. Have you ever felt that way? Like you're talking but not being heard? Like you're reaching for connection but touching only air? Like you're participating in a world that doesn't quite feel like it was made for you, or that you're somehow acting in a play with a script you never agreed to read? The Tibetan text calls this confusion the Bardo, a transitional state, a between world where the soul isn't fully dead but not fully reborn. It's a space of reflection, of illusion, of endless opportunities to wake up or to continue sleeping. What if that's where you are right now? And what if you're not the only one? The Egyptians, in their mysticism and monumental wisdom, taught something eerily similar. They called it the Duat, a mysterious realm that many assume comes only after physical death. But look deeper. The hieroglyphs don't just describe an underworld. They describe a crossing, a place of illusions, of tests, of mirrored landscapes. The Duat was said to be filled with guardians, challenges, and rivers that mirrored the Nile, yet shimmered with otherworldly substance. But here's the twist. The Duat wasn't necessarily after life. It was a symbolic space, where conscious beings found themselves between truth and forgetting. In tombs across the Valley of the Kings, inscriptions repeat a striking phrase: "The living walk in shadows of the true world, believing darkness to be light." That's not metaphor. That's an assertion that what we call life is the shadow, and what we call death might be the moment we finally open our eyes. And how do you know when you're looking at a shadow? When the thing you think you're seeing has no depth. When it flickers. When it shifts depending on the light. When you try to grab it, and nothing's there. Sound familiar? Plato knew this too. Thousands of years ago, he told the story of people chained inside a cave, unable to turn their heads, watching shadows on a wall cast by objects they couldn't see. To them, those shadows were reality. That's all they ever knew. And if someone tried to tell them there was a world outside the cave, they'd mock him, call him insane, because their entire identity was built on believing the shadows were all that existed. Now here's the chilling part. Plato wasn't just giving us a metaphor, he was describing the human condition. You were born into this cave. Into a world of flickering images, inherited beliefs, systems of control, and sensory illusions. You've been told what's real, what's possible, what's worth chasing. You've been taught to believe in the surface of things, in skin over soul, form over energy, distraction over depth. And somewhere deep inside, something in you has always whispered, "This isn't it. There's more. There has to be more." That whisper, that subtle stirring you felt during moments of silence, heartbreak, synchronicity, or even dreams that feel more vivid than waking life, that's not your imagination. That's the ancient part of you remembering what these civilizations never forgot. That you are a soul navigating a mirrored realm, that this life might not be your beginning, but part of your ongoing journey between the real and the remembered. The texts of Tibet, the tombs of Egypt, and the dialogues of Plato weren't just myth, poetry, or abstract philosophy. They were warnings, maps, clues. They were voices from beyond trying to remind you of where you really are. And they all say the same thing. The world you live in right now is not the end goal. It's not the destination. It's a corridor, a bardo, a duat, a cave, a dream. But here's the question that matters most. Do you want to wake up? Because waking up doesn't mean floating away or waiting to die. It means recognizing the illusion while you're still inside it. It means becoming aware in the dream, like a lucid dreamer who suddenly realizes they can fly. It means seeing the veil and choosing to see through it, every day, in every moment. You weren't meant to stay asleep. You weren't meant to accept shadows as truth, and the fact that you're hearing this now might just be the first crack in the wall of your cave. The ancient blueprint was never lost. It's been right here, hidden in plain sight, waiting for you to remember. What if everything you've ever touched, tasted, or trusted to be solid was actually nothing more than information? A projection, a shadow play conducted by consciousness itself. That chair you're sitting on, the phone in your hand, the breath you're taking right now, all of it seems so real, so physical, but what if it's not? What if the realness of the world is just the final illusion in a long sequence of carefully crafted perceptions? The truth is, modern physics has begun to unravel a truth that mystics have whispered about for centuries. Reality is not built from matter, it is built from information. Consciousness is not a side effect of the brain. It may be the force generating the entire experience. And the more science digs into the quantum fabric of our universe, the more it starts to sound like ancient spiritual revelation. Take the theory known as it from bit. It suggests that all of reality, from the galaxies spinning in deep space to the cells multiplying inside your body, is fundamentally composed of information. Not atoms, not particles, not even energy in the conventional sense, but binary yes-no decisions, choices, observations, a digital framework where reality only exists when it is noticed. At its core, everything around you may be the result of informational states interacting in ways we don't yet fully understand. But here's what we do know. Without observation, nothing collapses into form. This leads directly into one of the most bizarre, yet experimentally validated phenomena in quantum physics, the observer effect. If you've never heard of it, it sounds like something out of science fiction. At the smallest scales of our universe, particles do not exist in fixed positions or states. They exist in probability fields, waves of potential. They are nowhere and everywhere at the same time. But the moment they are observed, they choose. They collapse into one position. They become something definite, which raises a haunting question. If particles only become real when observed, what is reality before you're looking? The implication is profound. Consciousness doesn't just experience reality, it plays an active role in shaping it. When you observe something, your awareness is not passively witnessing it unfold. Your awareness is calling it into form. You're not just a visitor in the universe, you are one of its primary architects. This mirrors what the mystics have said all along, that the universe is a mirror, that what you focus on expands, that your inner world creates your outer experience. And now, science seems to be catching up. This isn't metaphor, it's measurable. In the famous double-slit experiment, electrons are fired through a barrier with two slits and then onto a screen. When no one is watching, they behave like waves, creating an interference pattern, as if they're passing through both slits at once. But the moment a detector is added to observe which slit the electron goes through, the pattern changes. The wave collapses, the electron chooses a path, it becomes a particle. The act of observation changed the outcome. So if electrons behave differently when watched, what else does? Could your life be shaped in the same way? Could your reality be literally responding to your awareness, your intention, your vibration? What if your thoughts aren't just internal dialogues, but blueprints feeding into the system, determining which potentials collapse into form? This might sound like New Age fantasy, but the language of physics continues to support it. One of the most staggering realizations is the illusion of solidity itself. What we perceive as solid is not truly solid. Atoms are made up of a nucleus surrounded by a cloud of electrons, but most of the space inside an atom is empty. If the nucleus of an atom were the size of a marble, the nearest electron would be thousands of feet away. Everything in between is void. So, what are you really touching when your hand meets a surface? You're not touching the object. You're feeling the resistance between two electromagnetic fields. What you interpret as pressure or texture is actually a force, a repulsion between electron clouds. Your fingers never actually make contact with the thing you're holding. They float above, separated by an invisible field, while your nervous system convinces you otherwise. The solidity is an illusion generated by your perception, a simulated experience designed for interaction, not truth. This realization is where science and spirituality converge. The ancient yogis said that the world is Maya, illusion. That form is not reality, but appearance. They taught that the senses deceive us, and that truth lies beyond what the eye can see. And now, physicists agree. What you see, hear, and touch is not reality itself. It is the translation of quantum interactions into a perceptual interface that your mind can interpret. Some scientists go even further, proposing that the universe behaves like a giant simulation. Not necessarily a computer simulation in the digital sense, but a construct, a code-based environment where reality is generated dynamically through interaction with awareness. It's not that there's a physical world out there being rendered independently of you. It's that what you perceive as out there is the result of a co-created experience between consciousness and potential. In other words, you're not navigating a pre-made universe. You're participating in an ongoing act of creation. Every moment, your perception is decoding information into form. Every thought, every feeling, is input. Every observation, a choice that defines the next frame of reality. This reframes everything. It means you're not a helpless passenger in an indifferent universe. You are a powerful participant in a dynamic field of consciousness. You are both the dreamer and the dream. And the more you awaken to this truth, the more lucid you become within this waking dream. It also means that spiritual practices like visualization, meditation, intention setting, and prayer are not abstract rituals. They are direct methods of interacting with the code of reality. When you visualize something with clarity and emotional charge, you are aligning your consciousness with that potential, and through the observer effect, increasing the likelihood that it will collapse into form. You are, quite literally, shaping your timeline. So when the sages told you that your thoughts become things, they weren't speaking in metaphor. They were pointing toward a fundamental law of reality that science is only now beginning to quantify. Consciousness is not passive. It is creative, and your role in this system is far more active than you were ever told. All of this leads to a simple but astonishing conclusion. Reality, as you experience it, is not fixed. It is fluid. It is responsive. It is holographic in nature, a layered, information-based projection, shaped by what you believe, observe, and feel. And the illusion of solidity, the feeling that this is just the way things are, is the greatest deception of all. What you perceive is only a sliver of what exists, and what exists is shaped by your awareness, which means the door to transformation has always been unlocked. The only thing standing between you and a different reality is your willingness to see. So the next time you touch something, remember, you're not feeling matter, you're feeling meaning. You're brushing up against the edge of the simulation, the interface between mind and code. And with every breath, every glance, every thought, you're not just walking through reality, you're writing it. What if I told you that the things you've dismissed as odd, fleeting, or merely psychological quirks may actually be the proof you've been living in the afterlife this entire time? Every now and then, you probably feel it. A strange sensation that this world doesn't quite add up. Maybe it's a moment where time suddenly stretches or collapses. Hours pass in what felt like minutes, or a single second feels impossibly long. Maybe it's the way a memory replays in your mind, not like a recollection, but like a dream you're still inside. Or that eerie sensation of déjà vu, where a place you've never been feels familiar down to the creak in the floorboards, the smell in the air, the emotion it stirs. You shrug it off. Everyone does. But what if none of these were accidents? What if they were symptoms? If you are, in fact, already living in the afterlife, then it makes sense that your experience of reality would feel fragmented. Memories wouldn't hold their usual weight because they're not anchored in the physical the way you think. Time wouldn't move in the strict linear fashion we've been taught to believe in. Instead, it would ripple, coil, and loop back on itself, much like how time behaves in dreams. Some moments would feel stretched like elastic, others would vanish before you even knew they arrived. You'd be playing a role, wearing a mask, participating in something that feels constructed, yet underneath, something raw and real would ache for your attention. Let's start with memory. Think of your past. How much of it feels real, solid, and continuous? Probably only the recent parts. The deeper you reach into the timeline of your life, the more it blurs, not just in detail, but in emotional texture. Some memories seem faded, like scenes from an old movie. Others feel vivid yet impossible, like they belong to someone else entirely. And then there are those memories you can't quite place, images, sounds, or emotions that rise up without context. Where did they come from? Were they dreams? Were they real? Or are they fragments of a different existence, bleeding through the veil? If this realm you're living in is a kind of purgatory, a space between lives, then that would explain it. In such a state, memory would function more like echoes in a hallway than chapters in a book. You wouldn't recall a linear story, you'd catch glimpses through fog, you'd feel haunted by things you can't name. The memories wouldn't be gone, they'd just be buried beneath layers of programming, roles, and repetition. And what about time? In a typical waking life, we expect time to be consistent. But how often does it betray you? 1 hour in a waiting room feels like eternity. A weekend with someone you love disappears in a blink. Days blur, weeks vanish. You reach for memories of last month and it feels like last year. Or you revisit an old memory and it feels like yesterday. This isn't just psychological, it's existential. It's what happens when you're living in a non-linear layer of consciousness. In other words, the afterlife isn't ruled by the clock, it's ruled by experience. Time, in this state, serves awareness, not the other way around. Then there's the sensation of déjà vu. You walk into a room and you feel it instantly. You've seen this, you've done this, you've said those exact words. For a second, everything is still, as if some deeper part of you knows what comes next. It's not imagination, it's not glitch, it's recognition. And if this realm is some kind of dream, some intermediate plane your soul is navigating, then déjà vu could be a rupture in the illusion. A glimpse of the underlying pattern, a reminder that you've been here before, maybe not in this form, but in essence. Maybe your soul remembers what your brain was programmed to forget. But perhaps the most telling symptom is that quiet, gnawing feeling inside you, the one you don't talk about. The sense that this life is somehow off. Like you're living inside a story that doesn't fully belong to you. You wake up and play the part you've been assigned. The job, the role, the identity. You interact, smile, perform. But deep down, something feels missing, not in a material way, but in a spiritual one. There's a disconnect between what you are and what you're doing. You're not broken, you're not lazy, you're not ungrateful, you're just misaligned, like a radio tuned to the wrong frequency. You can hear the noise of the world, but not the song of your soul. Think about the masks you wear. Every interaction demands a different version of you. You're someone at work, someone else at home, someone else online. You've built these selves to survive. But none of them are quite real. They're roles, constructs, facades. And at some point, you've probably asked yourself, who am I beneath all this? Not the career, not the personality, not the traumas, the real you, the authentic essence. That question matters, because in the afterlife, forgetting is the first stage of the journey. You're not just here to be entertained or punished or rewarded, you're here to remember. To wake up inside the dream and ask yourself why you're dreaming in the first place. And every moment of unease you feel, every flicker of unreality, is a breadcrumb leading you back to that awareness. Even your emotional landscape offers clues. Sometimes you feel emotions that seem far too large for the situation. A sadness that hits you out of nowhere, a longing for something you've never known, a joy that floods you in the most mundane moment. These aren't random, they are resonances, echoes, reminders that your soul is responding to something beyond the veil, some truth that your conscious mind hasn't yet caught up to. And that's why nothing quite satisfies you. No matter how much you achieve, how much you own, how many people love you, there's still that quiet ache. That whisper that says, this isn't it. Because it isn't. You weren't designed to be fulfilled by illusion. You were meant to awaken through it. The symptoms of the afterlife are everywhere. You see them in your dreamlike memories. You feel them in your distorted perception of time. You live them every time you slip into a role and forget your essence. You hear them in the silence between conversations, in the strange coincidences that seem too perfect to ignore, in the deep pull you feel when you gaze at the stars and somehow, for no logical reason, feel homesick. None of these things are accidents, they're signposts. And the moment you stop dismissing them, the moment you start paying attention, is the moment the illusion begins to crack. This isn't just life. And this isn't death. You're somewhere in between. You've been wandering through a world of mirrors, not realizing the truth is standing right behind your reflection, waiting for you to turn around. You don't have to force it. You don't need to escape or change your entire world overnight. The awareness itself is the key. Recognizing the symptoms is the beginning of healing, and once you see it, really see it, you can't unsee it. You've been here before, you just forgot. And now, the remembering has begun. What if I told you that you are not waiting to die to enter the afterlife? You're already in it? That what you think of as the real world is actually the in-between, the hallway, the liminal state between one form of existence and another? In Tibetan Buddhism, there is a concept that stretches the boundaries of everything we think we know about death and consciousness. It's called the Bardo. Traditionally, it refers to the state between death and rebirth, a realm where consciousness drifts, caught in a haze of confusion, clinging to what was, not yet grasping what will be. But here's the part no one talks about. Many spiritual teachers believed we are living in the Bardo right now. That this waking life, with its oddities, its impermanence, its strange emotional loops and haunting déjà vu, is not the final destination nor the beginning, it's the middle, the great in-between, the post-death dream we've mistaken for reality. Imagine that. This world, the one filled with your routines, your relationships, your emotions and fears, is not Earth, as you were told. It's a version of it, filtered, compressed, wrapped in layers of amnesia. You're not waiting for the Bardo to begin. You're navigating it already, and like most who pass through it, you don't remember how you got here. According to Tibetan texts, the Bardo is characterized by disorientation. Souls wander through environments that seem both familiar and unfamiliar, often attempting to interact with the world, only to discover that nothing responds the way it once did. They try to touch, but their hands pass through form. They try to speak, but no one hears them. They observe loved ones grieving, unaware of their presence. They move through scenes from their life, reviewing choices, facing reflections, encountering symbolic beings that either terrify or enlighten them. Time behaves strangely, space bends. Emotion shapes the landscape. It sounds haunting, but now consider this. How different is that from the life you live every day? You walk through spaces that sometimes feel eerily disconnected. You interact with others, yet often feel unseen or unheard. You try to change things, but it feels like pushing against glass. You chase happiness, only to find it dissolving in your hands. You look in the mirror and ask yourself, who am I really? You have dreams that feel more vivid than waking. You remember moments that never happened. You have fears you cannot explain. If the Bardo is a place of confusion, emotional projection, and identity crisis, then what is this? In the Bardo, souls are often unaware that they have died. They continue acting out old patterns, drawn toward the familiar, looping through scenes, unaware that they are free to awaken. Sound familiar? Most people live each day unaware that their soul is in transit. They follow scripts. They chase desires programmed into them. They suffer, and yet repeat the same patterns. They seek meaning, but are afraid to look too deeply. They don't question the nature of the stage they're standing on, because it feels real. But the Bardo feels real too. That's what makes it so compelling. The key trait of the Bardo is that it reflects consciousness back to itself. You are not punished there. You are mirrored. Whatever guilt, attachment, fear, or longing you carry becomes part of the environment. Beings appear as projections of your psyche. Scenery forms from your beliefs. Time warps around emotional intensity. And here's the thing. If you understand this, you can begin to see that your current reality operates in exactly the same way. Your outer world is constantly reflecting your inner state. Relationships mirror wounds you haven't healed. Opportunities or obstacles appear based on your self-worth. Your days fluctuate with the frequency of your thoughts. When you raise your awareness, everything around you shifts. That's not philosophy. That's direct feedback. That's the Bardo system functioning in real time. In this state, most souls don't realize they're dead, not because they're physically gone, but because they are spiritually asleep. They are caught in the in-between, where the old life has ended, but the new hasn't begun. That may be your current condition. You're here, but not fully awake. Aware, but not remembering. Existing, but not embodying. You see signs, you feel nudges, you catch glimpses, but the full remembering hasn't landed yet. That is the signature of the Bardo. Some ancient teachers describe the Bardo as a rare and precious opportunity, because even in its confusion, it offers an opening, a crack in the illusion. If you recognize the dream, you can wake up within it. You can become lucid. You can ascend. The same is true for this life. Every painful moment, every loss, every spiritual crisis is not meant to punish you. It's meant to shake you. It's meant to remind you that you are more than the role you're playing. It's meant to open the veil, if only for a moment, so you remember where you truly are. The Bardo is not just a place of shadows. It's a place of choice. If you wander in confusion, you recycle into the next illusion. But if you realize the illusion, if you recognize the mind's projections as symbols and not threats, you elevate. The Tibetan Book of the Dead speaks of peaceful and wrathful deities that appear during the Bardo journey. The peaceful ones represent your awakened potential, the wrathful ones, your unintegrated fears, but both are you, and both are trying to wake you up. You've met them here already. The peaceful deity is that moment of stillness when you're overwhelmed by beauty or truth. The wrathful deity is the anxiety that rises out of nowhere, the conflict that won't go away, the part of you that screams in pain just before a breakthrough. You are not being haunted, you are being reflected. Because this world is not fixed, it is fluid, it is symbolic, it is Bardo. You may think that death is an event that will happen to you in the future, but what if it already did? What if your last breath has already passed in another dimension, and this reality is the slow unfolding of what comes next? A review, a rebalancing, a recalibration. What if the life you're living is not a continuation, but a correction? You don't need to believe this, but ask yourself, why do you sometimes feel like you've done all this before? Why do some moments seem choreographed? Why do certain places trigger emotion with no known cause? Why do you feel like you're being watched, guided, or warned? Why do you feel like something has been forgotten? It's because it has. You've forgotten your previous transition. You've forgotten that you passed through the veil. You've forgotten that you came here not as a birth, but as a re-entry, and the veil is thick. It is designed that way, because if you remembered everything at once, it would break you. The Bardo eases you into remembrance. It uses symbols, pain, and synchronicity to stir your memory without shattering your mind. So what does this mean for you, right now? It means you can choose to wake up, not by forcing it, not by chasing the next guru or book or ritual, but by turning inward, by questioning the nature of what you see, by listening to the silence between your thoughts, by paying attention to the signals that don't come from logic, but from the subtle current beneath it all. The Bardo doesn't end by escaping, it ends by remembering. You don't need to find the exit, you need to find the awareness that this is the Bardo, and once you do, everything changes. You stop running from your fears, you start decoding the signs, you begin to respond rather than react, and you start living not as a prisoner of form, but as a navigator of the in-between. You're not lost, you're in process. You're not asleep, you're in the early stages of waking, and the beings you seek, the truth you crave, the freedom you desire, they're all within reach, not in the next life, but here, now. In this strange, symbolic, shimmering realm called the Bardo, where the veil is thin, the mirrors are everywhere, and the final illusion is believing you haven't already died. What if I told you that everything you touch, see, and hear feels real, not because it is real, but because it was designed to feel real? That the world around you isn't a direct experience of truth, but a symbolic interface masking a much deeper, far stranger reality you're not supposed to see. Imagine sitting in front of a computer screen. You see folders, documents, icons. You can drag them, click them, move them. They respond as if they're real objects. But you know, deep down, they're not. Those folders don't actually contain anything. They're just images, simplified representations of something happening invisibly within the machine. You interact with symbols, not with the raw data itself. And thank God for that. If you had to navigate streams of binary code every time you opened a file, you'd be overwhelmed. The interface protects you from the chaos underneath. It simplifies, it translates, it hides. Now take a breath and consider this. What if your experience of the world works the exact same way? What if physical reality is your soul's user interface? A series of symbolic icons designed not to show you the truth, but to guide your behavior inside a system far too complex to fully comprehend? This idea isn't science fiction. It's closer to a spiritual revelation, one that says you're not perceiving reality as it is, but as it needs to appear for you to function inside it. You're not seeing what is, you're seeing what keeps you alive. Your senses aren't portals to truth, they're filters. Evolution didn't select for truth, it selected for survival. Think about that. The organisms that survived long enough to reproduce weren't the ones that saw the universe accurately. They were the ones that saw it usefully. You don't need to see atoms, you need to know when something is hot. You don't need to see quantum probabilities, you need to spot a predator. Reality is compressed, rounded off, made familiar. Your brain constructs a simplified interface that allows you to operate efficiently within this simulation. But that also means you're walking through life, reacting to symbols, not substance. Let's go deeper. What does this interface actually look like? Start with the objects around you. A chair, a tree, a wall, your own hand. You believe they're solid, tangible, but they're not. At the atomic level, they're almost entirely empty space, electrons dancing in probability fields. What you feel as solid is actually just electromagnetic resistance, force fields repelling each other. You're not touching anything, you're interpreting repulsion as contact. Your nerves translate the signal into something meaningful, something symbolic. You don't experience reality, you experience an approximation of it, dressed up to look familiar, so you can move through it without going mad. And yet, you trust the interface so deeply that you forget it's an interface, just like you forget your desktop isn't a window into the computer's soul, it's just a skin, a language between worlds. Physical life works the same way. You believe the sky is blue, but there's no such thing as blue up there. That's just the way light scatters through Earth's atmosphere, and even that color only exists because your eyes interpret specific wavelengths through 3 cones in your retina. Another species would see something entirely different. So what is color, really? It's a perception, a convenience, a symbol. Now, apply that same logic to everything. What if your thoughts, your beliefs, your emotions are also interpretations within the interface? What if love, grief, hunger, purpose, all of it is part of the system's way of helping you navigate a realm you've forgotten is temporary? Let's look at the desktop again. That little blue folder on your screen doesn't tell you anything about the complexity underneath. It hides it. It's a shortcut. So what if your physical body is the shortcut to something far more vast? What if your entire human identity, name, face, gender, story, is like the folder icon? Useful, yes. Operable, yes. But not real, not the whole of you. Just the visible symbol of something immeasurably more expansive running in the background. And this is where things start to shift. Because once you realize you're operating in an interface, the question isn't, what is real? The question becomes, what is this interface trying to show me? And more importantly, what is it trying to keep me from seeing? Every interface has its limits, its blind spots. You can't access the motherboard through your desktop. You can't edit system code through an icon. And so too, your senses are capped. Your eyes can't see ultraviolet. Your ears can't hear certain frequencies. Your brain deletes most of what it perceives just so you can function. You're only conscious of what's relevant to your experience, not what's actually there. So when people talk about awakening, ascension, higher consciousness, they're not describing something woo-woo or abstract. They're talking about bypassing the interface, hacking the system, seeing the code instead of the icon, and once that happens, the whole illusion begins to flicker. You begin to notice the patterns, the synchronicities, the way certain people or moments seem scripted. You stop reacting to the surface of life and start listening to what it's pointing to underneath. And if this world is an interface, then what is it interfacing with? It's interfacing with you, the real you. not the story you've been telling yourself, not the roles you've been playing, but the part of you that can't be named. The consciousness behind the thoughts, the observer that watches the dream unfold and knows, this isn't all there is. The interface was never designed to imprison you. It was designed to train you, to challenge you, to awaken you. The limitations are part of the lesson. The veil is part of the path. And yet, just like with any interface, you have a choice. You can live inside it forever, assuming it's real, or you can begin to peel it back, layer by layer, until what remains is not symbol, but essence. This is why the world feels real, even when something in you whispers that it's not. That whisper is correct. The real isn't gone, it's just hidden, coded beneath the icons, waiting. And the moment you stop mistaking the icon for the truth, the moment you begin to ask what's behind the curtain of this experience, is the moment the interface starts to dissolve. You are not the icon, you are not the desktop, you are not the illusion, you are the user, the witness, the consciousness behind the mask of form. And now, you're starting to remember. What if I told you that the world you live in wasn't designed to liberate you, but to contain you, to lull you into a sleep so deep that you forgot you were dreaming? It's not a mistake that life feels confusing, that, despite all your efforts, something always seems just out of reach, like you're walking through molasses, chasing something that keeps moving just beyond the edge of your awareness. You feel it, don't you? The invisible weight pressing down on your consciousness. The distractions, the noise, the endless loops that never quite resolve. There's a reason for that, and it didn't happen by accident. Across ancient spiritual texts, particularly the Gnostic scriptures, there's a recurring theme that this world is not what it seems. The Gnostics spoke of forces that govern this reality from behind the curtain. They called them archons, not demons in the conventional sense, not horned monsters or cartoonish villains, but energetic intelligences, forces of limitation. Their purpose isn't to torture you in fire and brimstone. Their purpose is to keep you bound within illusion, to keep you from remembering who and what you truly are. These beings weren't described as evil in a simplistic way. They were architects of form, of density, of forgetfulness. They administer the patterns of duality, of division, fear, hierarchy, and control. They operate through systems, not through fangs and claws. They don't knock on your door. They speak through institutions, through ideologies, through the 1,000 little rules that tell you how to think, act, speak, and believe. Their fingerprint is subtle, found in the way society trains you to value productivity over presence, appearance over essence, obedience over inner truth. Think about it. From the moment you're born, you are surrounded by structures that tell you who you are, school systems that standardize your curiosity, media that bombards you with noise, narratives that teach you what success looks like, how relationships should feel, what roles you must play to be accepted. Even the family system, passed down through generations, often reinforces unconscious patterns that limit your soul's expression. All of this creates a grid of reality that feels normal because it's all you've ever known. But normal doesn't mean true. You were born into a maze, not because you did something wrong, but because you agreed to the game. Before entering this life, your soul chose to forget. It signed a contract, not in ink, but in frequency. A vibrational agreement that said, I will go back into the dream, and I will forget who I am, so I can remember it in a deeper, embodied way. Forgetting was not a punishment, it was a prerequisite for awakening. But here's where it gets tricky. The moment you entered this realm, the forgetting began. You were surrounded by symbols, language, beliefs, and energies designed to reinforce the illusion. And those who had forgotten before you became your teachers. They taught you how to behave in a world that had no memory of its true origin. They taught you to be afraid of your intuition, to suppress your imagination, to ridicule mystery, to conform for survival. This is the work of the shadow designers. Not gods, not devils, but forces of density, the architects of limitation. They operate through mass systems of influence that tell you what to value, what to chase, what to fear. They want your energy focused outward, on approval, on performance, on possessions. They feed off your attention. Your distraction fuels the system. Your awakening threatens it. Have you ever wondered why silence makes people uncomfortable? Why stillness feels unnatural? It's because the world has been engineered to keep you in motion, constantly chasing, consuming, reacting. Because in stillness, you begin to remember. In silence, you begin to feel something deeper, something ancient, rising through the noise. That feeling isn't anxiety. It's awakening trying to surface through layers of programming. The archonic forces, whether you see them as metaphors or literal entities, are not invincible. Their power only exists through agreement. Every time you believe the voice that says you're not enough, you lend them strength. Every time you silence your truth to fit in, you reinforce the illusion. But every time you question, pause, or feel the falseness of what's being sold to you, their grip loosens. And that matters more than you think. You see, this illusion only works if you don't know it's an illusion. Once you become aware, the code begins to shift. You start to see the patterns. You start to feel the manipulation. And you start to reclaim the energy that was being siphoned off through unconscious behavior. This is why awakening is so difficult, because it requires you to stand against everything you were told was right. When you begin to awaken, you feel the tension between your soul and the world around you. You see how much of society is built on fear, on separation, on survival. And that's no accident. These structures weren't created to support your liberation. They were created to keep you looping in karma, to keep you identifying with the body, with the story, with the suffering. But here's the paradox. You chose to enter this system. You agreed to the amnesia, not because you were weak, but because your soul is powerful enough to wake up inside the dream. The illusion was never meant to be a prison. It was meant to be a mirror, a test, a forge. And every time you question what you've been told, every time you trust your inner knowing over outer authority, you reclaim a piece of yourself. This is how the soul reassembles itself, not in one grand moment of enlightenment, but in 1,000 quiet moments of remembrance. You remember when you turn off the screen and listen to your breath. You remember when you speak a truth that scares you. You remember when you feel your pain without numbing it. You remember when you look at the stars and sense that they're watching back. And yes, the shadow designers will still be here, whispering through media, through politics, through the unconscious chatter of the collective mind. But they only hold power over the unaware, and you are no longer unaware. When you see them for what they are, programs designed to test you, to push you toward evolution, you stop fearing them. You start using them. Their resistance becomes your resistance training. Their darkness becomes your contrast. Their lies sharpen your truth. And slowly, the illusion begins to break. You realize that the real battle was never against them. It was against the forgetting, against the slow erosion of your knowing, against the seduction of fitting in. The real battle was always about memory, soul memory. And now that it's returning, you begin to feel the shift. The system no longer works on you the way it once did. The noise becomes background. The urgency becomes fiction. You see through the veil, not with your eyes, but with your energy. You move differently, speak differently, breathe differently, because you're not just surviving in the illusion anymore. You're transmuting it. You're not here to fight the shadow designers. You're here to transcend them, to use their structure as a catalyst, to see the false, not as enemy, but as invitation, because every illusion eventually collapses, and when it does, the only thing that remains is truth, and that truth is you. What if I told you that the most undeniable proof that this world isn't what it seems doesn't come from ancient texts or philosophical speculation, but from people who've already died and come back? All over the world, people who have experienced clinical death tell astonishingly similar stories. They describe leaving their bodies, floating above hospital beds, watching doctors work frantically to revive them. But that's just the beginning. Because what comes next in their descriptions shatters everything we assume about life and death. They speak of stepping into realms of overwhelming peace, into spaces filled with colors they've never seen before, sounds that seem to sing directly to the soul, and beings of light who seem to know everything about them. Not only that, but the overwhelming message they bring back is this: That side felt more real than this one ever has. Think about that. People who have physically died, whose brain activity has flatlined, who've had no measurable heartbeat for minutes, sometimes longer, consistently return saying the same thing. That where they went wasn't a dream or a hallucination. It was home. It felt more real than anything they've ever known. This reality, the one we're in right now, felt to them like a fading memory by comparison. Thin, muted, distant. How is that possible? And why are their stories so alike, across time, culture, religion, and language? These aren't just dramatic anecdotes. These accounts are being recorded, studied, and catalogued by doctors, psychologists, and researchers. Some of the most respected professionals in the medical field have had their belief systems transformed entirely after witnessing what happens to patients who return from the brink. Not because it fits a convenient narrative, but because the evidence is impossible to ignore. One striking example comes from a respected neurosurgeon who had a reputation for skepticism. After a sudden illness sent him into a coma, he experienced what he now describes as a journey beyond this world. A passage through levels of existence so rich, so hyper-real, that his scientific worldview collapsed entirely. He saw intricate geometric patterns, heard sounds that carried thought within them, and encountered beings that communicated with him without language, just direct knowing. When he came back, everything had changed. His understanding of the brain, of reality, of consciousness itself, had to be re-evaluated, because what he experienced could not be dismissed. It did not fit within any of the frameworks he once trusted. But perhaps even more mind-opening are the cases involving children. Young kids, with no theological training, no exposure to metaphysical ideas, have died during surgeries or accidents and come back with vivid, coherent descriptions of events that occurred while their bodies were clinically dead. Some recount conversations that happened in distant rooms. Others describe meeting deceased relatives they were never told about. There are documented cases of children returning from these experiences with information they simply could not have known unless something beyond physical reality was at play. One child awoke from a near-death experience and told his parents that he'd met his sister. The parents were stunned. They had never told him they'd lost a baby before he was born. Another boy described seeing a bright field filled with light and being told he had to return because it wasn't time yet. He wept not out of fear, but out of longing. He said he didn't want to come back, because over there was love so total, so all-consuming, that coming back into his body felt like being compressed into something far too small. These aren't fantasies. These are detailed, emotionally charged recollections by people with no incentive to lie, no context to invent such experiences, and in many cases, no conscious awareness of what was happening around them physically during the time their body had shut down. If you listen closely to enough of these accounts, a pattern emerges. It's not just a place they go to, it's a remembering. They speak of it not as something foreign or unknown, but something familiar, as if they'd been there before. And when they return, they often say the same thing. This world feels different now, thinner, lighter, less real. The colors here are dim, the emotions dulled. It's like they've stepped back into a lower resolution version of life. The illusion becomes obvious. The roles and routines of daily existence feel forced, heavy, artificial. Many struggle to reintegrate, not because they're traumatized by what they saw, but because what they saw was so much more true than anything we call reality. So what does that mean for you? It means that this life, this dimension you're walking through, is not the ultimate version of existence. It's not the highest resolution. It's not the full picture. If the people who have left their bodies, experienced what's on the other side, and come back, all say the same thing, that we are living in the lesser dream, then what you're experiencing right now is a kind of rehearsal space, a set, a projection. It's like waking up from a lucid dream where everything suddenly makes sense, only to be pulled back into a fog. And now, that fog feels stifling, because part of you remembers clarity. That part of you aches to see beyond again. That ache you feel when you're gazing out the window, or watching the stars, or sitting quietly alone. That's not sadness, it's homesickness. It's your soul remembering where it came from. The near-death experience is not an anomaly, it's not an outlier, it's a crack in the wall, a momentary glitch in the system where truth comes pouring in. And every time someone comes back, they're bringing us a message. They're saying, don't wait until your body dies to wake up, you're already in the dream, start remembering now. This knowledge changes everything. Because if you know this world isn't the final layer, you stop being so afraid of losing it. You stop gripping so tightly. You let go of the fear that you'll disappear, that death is a void, that consciousness ends. And in its place comes peace, a strange and quiet peace. Because now, you know you're not your body, you never were. You are the awareness that passes through bodies, through dreams, through layers of reality, gathering wisdom, gathering experience. And when this layer ends, another begins, and none of it is accidental. Maybe that's why people who have had near-death experiences often come back changed. They're more patient, less judgmental, more open, more present. They stop chasing things. They stop fearing the unknown, because the unknown is no longer unknown to them. And what if you don't need to have a near-death experience to reach the same realization? What if listening to these stories, contemplating their meaning, and feeling their resonance within your own soul is enough? You don't need to die to wake up. You only need to remember, because the echoes from the edge are already calling to you, and something deep within you already knows. They're telling the truth. What if I told you that everything you're experiencing right now isn't the final destination of your soul, but a rehearsal, a simulation, a training ground meticulously designed to prepare you for something far greater than this world could ever contain? The idea may seem strange at first, especially when you're caught in the heaviness of it all, the pain, the confusion, the repetition. But what if those very aspects of your life weren't evidence of chaos or failure, but clues? What if the struggles you face, the patterns you repeat, and the emotions you're forced to confront are all part of a curriculum, a living, breathing system of soul education? This physical realm isn't random, and you didn't end up here by accident. Earth is not just a planet, it's a classroom, a virtual interface layered with emotion, density, and polarity, designed to challenge consciousness into expansion. You, as a soul, chose to enter this realm knowing full well that it would push you to your limits. And why? Because only in the presence of resistance does true strength emerge. Only in the face of illusion does true clarity arise. What you're moving through is not meaningless. It's training. Imagine being dropped into a holographic simulation. Every person you meet is a mirror, every moment is a message, every hardship is a prompt, and every choice is an echo. You're not just walking through life, you're participating in an ongoing energetic feedback loop. Every thought you think, every action you take, every intention you hold is generating a vibrational imprint, and that imprint shapes what you experience next. In other words, you are not simply reacting to life, you are being trained by it, you are evolving through it. The frustrations you encounter are not punishments, they are tailored opportunities. The betrayals, the delays, the heartbreaks, none of it is arbitrary. Each one carries a hidden curriculum. Each one asks the same question in a different form. Will you remember who you are through this? Earth is a realm of cause and effect, of karma, not as cosmic revenge, but as vibrational feedback. What you put out returns, not always immediately, not always obviously, but always precisely. Because this plane is interactive, responsive, designed not just for experience, but for refinement. Think of it like a sacred simulator. The soul drops in, wearing a body like a virtual suit. It forgets its source to fully engage with the illusion. And then, challenge by challenge, it begins to remember, slowly, awkwardly, painfully, until that remembering becomes its new foundation. You might ask, why would any soul agree to this? Why would you volunteer for amnesia, for pain, for limitation? And the answer is simpler than you think. Because no growth occurs in stagnation. Because light only knows its full brilliance when surrounded by shadow. Because love only proves its depth when tested by loss. You didn't come here to escape suffering, you came here to alchemize it. And you're not alone. Every being on this plane is walking through their own curriculum. Some are in early stages, just starting to question. Others are deep in remembrance, holding light for those still asleep. But no one is above the training, not even the teachers. Every moment still tests their alignment. Every emotion still asks for integration. Every relationship still reflects something unhealed. That's how this simulator works. It personalizes. It adapts. It knows exactly what you need to face in order to break free from the cycles you've repeated for lifetimes. And it won't stop until the lesson is embodied, not memorized, not intellectually understood, but lived, felt, transformed at the core of your being. So if you've ever wondered why certain situations keep repeating, why similar people keep showing up in different skins, why you find yourself circling the same emotional terrain over and over again, it's because the training hasn't landed yet. The loop continues until the lesson is fully claimed, until you no longer react from habit, but respond from presence, until you no longer seek escape, but engage with full awareness. This is not a punishment, it's precision. The universe doesn't waste experiences. Every challenge is calibrated to stretch the exact part of you that's still asleep, and every breakthrough is a signal to the simulator that you're ready for the next level. Even the small moments are part of it, especially the small ones, the way you speak when no one is watching, the thoughts you entertain when you're alone, the energy you bring into a room. Every moment is a test, not in the judgmental sense, but in the energetic sense. Each instant is asking you, who are you choosing to be right now? And it's not about perfection. This isn't a game you win by being flawless. It's a process you evolve through by being honest, by being willing to feel what's uncomfortable, to confront what you've suppressed, to see where you've abandoned yourself. That's the real training. Can you hold your truth without collapsing? Can you stay open when it hurts? Can you love when it's not returned? Because here's the deeper truth. You're not training to survive Earth. You're training for what comes after. For the planes of existence that require full energetic coherence. Realms where thought manifests instantly. Realms where fear becomes form in an instant, and so does love. In those realms, you cannot fake alignment. You cannot wear masks. You must be in full harmony with your essence. And Earth is preparing you for that. This plane slows things down. It gives you space. It allows time between thought and manifestation, between action and consequence. That delay is mercy. It gives you time to notice, to adjust, to awaken. Without that buffer, your unhealed fear would instantly become your reality. Your hidden resentment would take shape before you could blink. That's why you're here, to clean your frequency, to align your energy, to evolve your consciousness until it becomes safe for you to step into higher planes without creating more distortion. So the next time you feel overwhelmed, remember the simulation. Remember that everything is happening for you, not to you. That your soul is not being punished, it's being refined. And that nothing is wasted, not a single tear, not a single breath. Every part of this journey is data, feedback, initiation. You are not a victim of this world. You are a trainee of eternity. You are rehearsing divinity in a realm that challenges you to forget it. And with every step you take toward remembering, you rewrite the script not only for yourself, but for every soul watching you, waiting for permission to do the same. Earth is not the endgame. It is the proving ground, the arena, the forge. Not because you've avoided the fire, but because you're choosing to walk through it. Eyes open, heart awake, soul steady, rehearsing the reality that is already waiting for you beyond the veil. What if I told you that the pain you carry, the wounds you try to forget, the heaviness you hide behind your smile, isn't a punishment or a curse, but a doorway? We've been taught to run from suffering, to numb it, to medicate it, to avoid it at all costs. Pain, we're told, is the enemy of life, something to fix or escape. But what if that isn't true? What if the very thing you've been trying to escape is the one thing trying to wake you up? If this reality is a form of the afterlife, a dreamlike realm between realms, then suffering here doesn't serve the same function it does in a purely physical world. It's not just the body reacting to harm. It's the soul sending signals through the illusion. Think of suffering not as damage but as communication, not as cruelty but as a coded message. What you feel as pain may actually be your inner compass, pointing toward what still needs to be remembered, healed, or reclaimed. And here's the truth most people aren't ready to face. Suffering persists in the afterlife because consciousness persists. You don't become enlightened simply by leaving your body. You don't shed your wounds by crossing some invisible threshold. Wherever you go, there you are. Whatever is unhealed follows you. Whatever you suppress in life, whatever you refuse to face, becomes the architecture of your experience in the next realm. And if this plane is already a form of the afterlife, then your pain is not random, it's revealing. Look closely at your life. Look at the moments that broke you, the losses that shattered your identity, the betrayals that redefined your trust, the loneliness that left you aching in silence. In those moments, something inside you cracked, and through that crack, something older, deeper, and truer began to emerge. It may have taken years. It may still be unfolding, but if you're honest, you'll see that your greatest shifts didn't come during the easy times. They came when you had no choice but to grow. That is the purpose of suffering in this realm. It's the soul's alarm system, a sacred discomfort, designed not to punish you, but to pierce through the dream. Pain forces presence. It pulls you out of autopilot and brings you to your knees, right into the now. It stops the story long enough for a deeper voice to speak, and that voice always says the same thing: there's more, you're more, wake up. The external world often mirrors your internal state, but not in the way we're used to thinking. This isn't about blame, it's about reflection. What shows up in your life is often a symbol, a projection of what still lives inside you, consciously or not. That toxic relationship, the one that drains your spirit? It might be mirroring a belief you picked up long ago that says love has to hurt to be real. That job that leaves you exhausted and empty? It might be a symbol of how little you believe your own time and energy are worth. The rejection that keeps repeating? It could be echoing the unworthiness that was planted in you as a child. This realm reflects, and the sharper the pain, the deeper the reflection. But again, this isn't about shame, it's about awakening, because once you see the pattern, you can step outside of it. Once you recognize the mirror, you can stop reacting to the image and start healing the source. Even trauma, perhaps especially trauma, becomes a kind of compass in the afterlife. It points directly to the places within you that have been forgotten or fragmented. It carries the memory of the soul's journey, not just from this life, but from others. If you've ever felt an irrational fear, a deep grief that doesn't seem to belong to your personal story, or a longing you can't quite name, you're not imagining it, you're remembering. And trauma is the residue of what wasn't fully resolved. In this plane, the afterlife doesn't begin after death. It unfolds in every moment you confront your suffering with awareness. Every time you allow yourself to feel what you once numbed. Every time you meet your pain with compassion instead of resistance. You bring a lost part of yourself back into wholeness. That's soul retrieval. And it doesn't require a healer or a ritual. It requires honesty, stillness, presence. But let's be clear, this isn't about glorifying pain. Suffering isn't noble in and of itself. It's not something to chase or idolize, but it is a portal. And once you understand that, you stop asking, why me? And start asking, what is this trying to show me? That shift changes everything, because now your pain has meaning. Now it becomes a teacher, a guide, a gateway to remembrance. Think of the most spiritually awakened people you've ever heard of. Mystics, sages, visionaries. Most of them didn't arrive at their wisdom through pleasure. They were cracked open by hardship. Stripped of illusion, humbled by loss. It wasn't the absence of suffering that enlightened them, it was their relationship to it. They stopped running, they turned inward, they faced the fire and walked through it, not around it. And on the other side, they found themselves. That is the path you're walking now. And the good news is, you don't have to go through it alone. Every time you choose to meet your pain with curiosity instead of fear, you invite unseen support to rise around you. Call it guides, call it grace, call it your higher self, but it's real. And it's always waiting for that moment you say, I'm ready to heal. The world around you will not always reflect comfort, but it will always reflect truth. And sometimes that truth hurts, not because the universe is cruel, but because awakening is an act of shedding, of unlearning, of returning, and the deeper you've forgotten, the more intense the process of remembering can feel. But here's the miracle. Every time you face your pain, you become more whole. Every time you allow it to teach you, instead of define you, you shift the entire frequency of your soul. And eventually, the same wounds that once kept you trapped become the very gates through which you re-enter your power. Suffering exists in this realm because this realm is a school, not a prison, not a punishment, but a passage. And every ache you feel is the soul, stretching, growing, expanding into the fullness of who you really are. You are not your pain, but your pain is part of your path. And if you can trust it, if you can sit with it, breathe into it, listen to it without trying to silence it, it will speak to you. It will reveal what's underneath the surface of your life. And when it does, you will see what was always there, the truth you were never meant to forget. You're not broken, you're remembering, and this pain is just the beginning. What if I told you that the very thing you've spent your whole life searching for, the clarity, the purpose, the deep knowing of who and what you are, was once fully known to you, and that you were the one who chose to forget it? It's hard to imagine. Why would anyone willingly agree to be born into a world where pain is constant, meaning is veiled, and truth is buried beneath layers of illusion? Why would a soul, in full remembrance of its divine origin, choose to enter a place where everything it once knew would be wiped clean? The answer is both simple and staggering, because you understood, at the deepest level, that forgetting would make the rediscovery sacred. Before you arrived here, in this body, in this life, you existed in full awareness, not in the intellectual sense, but as an experiential reality. You knew your connection to Source not as a theory, but as your natural state. You were expansive, unbound, luminous. But in that state of perfect knowledge, there was nothing to strive toward, nothing to become, because you already were everything. There was no contrast, no tension, no hunger. And while that may sound like bliss, it offered no evolution, no deepening, no texture, no growth. So you made a choice, a pre-birth agreement. You, as a soul, said yes to the veil, yes to the forgetting. Yes to entering this dense realm where pain would sharpen your wisdom, where loss would amplify your love, and where every step back toward your truth would carry weight, meaning, and power. You didn't fall. You dove, not out of ignorance, but out of devotion. You understood that remembering something you never forgot would change nothing, but rediscovering it, earning it, would change everything. This is divine amnesia. It's not a flaw, it's a feature. It's the sacred forgetting that allows you to walk through this life with the illusion of separation, so that when you do touch truth, when you do feel the spark of the eternal return, it's not just beautiful, it's transformative, it's earned. Awareness, in this dimension, cannot be handed to you. It must be cultivated. You must taste illusion to know truth. You must walk through the fog to understand the light. If you were born into full remembrance, you would never choose to grow. You wouldn't seek, or ask, or ache for more. And without the ache, you would never unfold. Look at the way your life unfolds. Moments of hardship that broke you open. Synchronicities that pulled you from the edge. Encounters with people who felt strangely familiar, like echoes of a forgotten soul family. Those weren't random. They were carefully placed milestones, reminders, triggers, breadcrumbs on your path back to the self you buried deep within. But why bury it at all? Because you wanted the power of rediscovery. You didn't come here to be light, you already were. You came here to remember it in the midst of darkness. You came to remember your divinity while everything around you told you otherwise. That contrast, that tension, is the crucible through which true mastery is born. It's easy to say, I am divine, when you're surrounded by bliss. It's another thing entirely to say it when you're lost, afraid, rejected, or drowning in grief. That is where the remembering becomes real. That is where your soul stretches and deepens and expands far beyond the boundaries of its original knowing. Not just what you are, but why. And here's the secret most never tell you. The forgetting was not imposed upon you by some cosmic force. You agreed to it. You said yes to the veil, yes to the confusion, yes to the slow burning realization that grows over years, not seconds. And every time you feel like you're waking up, every time you feel that sacred thrum of recognition, you are not learning something new. You are remembering something ancient, something buried, but not lost. This is why spiritual awakening can be so emotionally overwhelming, because when the veil starts to lift, and you catch even a glimpse of who you really are beneath the identity, the conditioning, the fear, it doesn't just feel like inspiration. It feels like coming home, like reuniting with a part of yourself that you never knew you were missing. But the paradox of awakening is this: it doesn't happen all at once. It's layered, cyclical. You remember in fragments. You awaken in waves. Just when you think you've arrived, life presents a new challenge, a deeper level, a new forgetting, not to punish you but to deepen you, to make sure your remembrance is embodied, not just conceptual. Because knowledge is passive, but embodiment changes the entire field of reality. That's why you often feel like you're dancing between clarity and confusion, between expansion and contraction. It's not failure, it's the rhythm of divine amnesia working through you. One moment you feel connected to everything, buzzing with the infinite. The next, you're back in your humanness, anxious, small, uncertain. This oscillation is the training ground. This back and forth is how your consciousness integrates the eternal into the temporal. If you remembered everything all at once, your past lives, your soul contracts, your multidimensional nature, it would overwhelm your nervous system. You wouldn't be able to function here. The veil is there for your protection, not your punishment. And as you grow, it thins. Not because someone lifts it for you, but because you've strengthened enough to part it yourself. The forgetting makes the remembering sacred. Like a treasure buried deep beneath the earth, the excavation gives it value. It's the journey into the cave, the descent into the dark, that makes the light so powerful when it finally returns. That's why you chose this path. Not to become divine, but to remember your divinity after you believed it was lost. Even now, pieces of you are waking up. The dreams that linger long after you open your eyes. The chills you get when truth is spoken. The moments when time bends, and something beyond the veil brushes against your skin. That's the self calling to itself. That's remembrance in motion. And with each glimpse, each pulse of recognition, you draw closer to full embodiment. But don't rush it. This isn't a race. You're not here to reach some final state of enlightenment and escape. You're here to live as remembrance, to walk as knowing, to hold the divine inside your humanness like a secret fire. That's what changes the world, not escaping it, but lighting it up from the inside. So the next time you feel lost, or small, or disconnected, don't ask, "Why am I not there yet?" Ask instead, "What part of myself am I being asked to remember right now?" Because every challenge, every disappointment, every longing is pointing to a part of you that was hidden on purpose, so that when you reclaim it, you don't just know it, you become it. You didn't forget by accident, you forgot by design, and every moment of remembrance is a miracle unfolding through you. A homecoming, a reactivation of something ancient, sacred, and infinitely alive. This is divine amnesia, and you are finally starting to remember. What if I told you that no matter how alone you've felt, on your darkest nights, in your quietest fears, you have never walked a single step of this journey by yourself? There are forces around you, subtle, loving, infinitely wise, guiding your every movement through this strange dream we call reality. They don't shout, they don't force, they whisper, they nudge, they show you patterns, coincidences, signs, and if you're not paying attention, you might miss it all. But once you begin to look, really look, you'll see them everywhere. The guides have always been with you, not outside you, but beside you. woven into the edges of your perception, like golden threads running beneath the fabric of the world. They are not ghosts, nor are they characters from myths. They are consciousnesses, some you knew long before this lifetime, others connected to your soul through shared purpose or shared history. You can call them spirit guides, higher selves, guardian beings. It doesn't matter. They don't care what you name them. What they care about is your awakening, your remembrance, your return to the truth you've temporarily forgotten. And in this plane, this afterlife disguised as life, they are your allies in the fog. Their communication isn't linear, it isn't verbal. You won't usually hear a voice in your ear or see a figure at the foot of your bed. It's far more elegant than that. They speak in dreams, in symbols, in unexpected turns of phrase from strangers, in moments when time slows down and something inside you pauses, breathless, because it feels like the universe just leaned closer and winked. You might brush it off as a coincidence, but you feel it, the slight electricity in the air, the sudden clarity, the inner knowing that says, that meant something. Well, this is synchronicity, and it is one of the most reliable signals that you're being guided from beyond the veil. It's not random, it's not accidental, it's the language of the afterlife bleeding into this world. Repeating numbers on clocks, a song playing at the exact moment you're thinking about someone, meeting a person who says the one thing you needed to hear that day, delays that lead to revelations, mistakes that open new paths. These aren't glitches, these are guideposts, and the more you pay attention to them, the more frequently they appear. In truth, synchronicity is the GPS of this realm. You're not navigating blind, you're being gently pulled along a path designed for your soul's growth. And these signals are how the system confirms you're on the right track, or alerts you when you're not. If something keeps showing up in your life, especially in unexpected ways, stop and ask, what is this trying to tell me? Who is trying to speak to me through this? But the signs go even deeper than that. Numbers, for example, have long been used as symbols in the dream. Think about how many times you've looked at the clock and seen 11:11, or 2:22, or 3:33. The rational mind wants to dismiss it, but the soul stirs. You feel it before you understand it. These repeating sequences aren't just pretty patterns, they are calls, checkpoints, frequency activators. Some part of you recognizes them as codes, embedded into your experience, to spark remembrance. They're not speaking to your intellect, they're speaking to your ancient memory. And what about dreams? In this afterlife space, dreams are not simply the product of brain activity during sleep. They are access points, bridges. Your guides often use dreams to bypass your conscious mind, which is so often cluttered with noise, logic, and distraction. In dreams, you are more receptive, you let go, you allow. And so they step through, sometimes in form, sometimes as symbols, and place seeds in your psyche. You may dream of a house you've never seen, a person who feels deeply familiar, a conversation that lingers in your body long after you wake. That wasn't just a dream, that was contact, that was alignment happening beneath the surface of your understanding. But the veil doesn't only lift in sleep, it thins when you're in stillness, when you meditate, or lose yourself in music, or sit quietly in nature and let the world slow down. These are moments when the simulation softens, when the illusion loosens its grip, and in those spaces, the guidance becomes louder, not because it changes, but because you do. You finally become quiet enough to hear it. The problem is never that the signs aren't there, it's that you're too distracted, too stressed, too focused on survival to notice them. But once you begin to trust that the guidance is real, something extraordinary happens. Your entire experience starts to shift. You start living in alignment. You stop forcing outcomes. You begin to feel held, supported, even when things go wrong, even when pain shows up. You feel a deeper current beneath it all, carrying you forward. And that current is intelligent, it is conscious, it is love. Many people think they're alone simply because they can't see what's walking beside them. But if you could shift your perception, just for a moment, you'd see that you are surrounded. That every major moment in your life has been witnessed. That your breakdowns, your breakthroughs, your silent prayers have never gone unnoticed. There are presences around you that have celebrated your courage, mourned your despair, and cheered for your resilience. You were never forgotten. You were never forsaken. You've simply been learning how to hear again. Because awakening doesn't just mean realizing the world is an illusion, it means recognizing the help within that illusion. You were never dropped into this dream alone. You entered with a team, a circle, a network of higher intelligences committed to your evolution. Some of them are souls you've journeyed with before. Others are fragments of your own higher consciousness. But all of them are here for one reason: to help you remember who you really are. And the more you communicate with them, the more they respond. Speak to them, ask for signs, invite their presence. Not from desperation, but from devotion, from reverence, and then be still. Watch what unfolds. Maybe it's a book falling off a shelf, a stranger offering exactly the insight you were searching for, a sudden gut feeling to take a different road, and discovering something life-changing along the way. These are not accidents. This is how the afterlife speaks inside the illusion. It doesn't need trumpets or lightning bolts. It uses the ordinary to point to the extraordinary. And once you start seeing it, you'll never unsee it. Life becomes interactive, magical, intimate. You begin to realize that you're not just a passive player in this dream. You're in a dialogue with it. And that dialogue is sacred. You're not lost. You're being guided. Even when you feel disconnected, even when it seems like no one's listening, they are. Every time you ask, you're heard. Every time you seek, you're answered. The only question is, will you notice the answer when it arrives? You've never truly been alone. Not in this world, not in the next, not ever. And once you start listening, not just with your ears, but with your soul, you'll realize that the veil isn't as thick as it seems. It was never meant to separate you. Only to soften the light until you were ready to see it. And now, you're ready. What if I told you that this isn't your first time waking up? It's just the first time you've stayed awake long enough to realize it? You've been here before, in different forms, under different skies, with different names and faces. But the essence underneath it all has remained untouched. A single thread of awareness that has woven itself through lifetimes of forgetting, remembering, and forgetting again. The question now isn't whether you've lived before. It's whether you're ready to stop reliving the same story. And finally, wake up from the loop. This loop isn't a punishment. It's a pattern, a repetition of themes, lessons, and emotional echoes designed to bring your awareness back to center again and again until you truly see. Most people aren't trapped by circumstance. They're trapped by unconscious cycles of energy that continue to replay because they've never been fully felt, observed, or understood. The same relationships, the same emotional reactions, the same dreams, the same disappointments. Round and round it goes, until something finally breaks open. And that something is you. Waking up from the afterlife doesn't mean escaping this world. It means seeing it clearly, lucidly, as the symbolic, multi-layered, energetic mirror that it really is. You don't need to die to wake up. You just need to stop assuming that what you see is all there is. You need to shift from reacting to life to reading it, from moving through it blindly to observing it with sacred precision. That's what lucidity really means, not control, but clarity. Lucidity starts with stillness. Not silence as the absence of sound, but silence as the presence of awareness. A kind of inner spaciousness, where the constant narrative of the mind is finally quiet enough for the soul to speak. This is why meditation isn't just a practice. It's a portal. It's a crack in the illusion. The moment you sit down, breathe deeply, and watch instead of engage, you step outside the loop. You stop spinning with the pattern and begin to see the pattern itself. The breath is your anchor. It's the only part of your nervous system you can consciously control. And yet, it's also the bridge between body and spirit. When you breathe with awareness, you re-enter the present moment. And in the present, the illusion cannot hold. The loop cannot survive full presence. Because the loop depends on unconscious reaction, not conscious observation. The more you come home to your breath, the more you begin to see the looping thoughts for what they are: scripts, programs, shadows of unprocessed emotion. And, beneath those scripts, you begin to hear your soul. Your soul doesn't speak in words, it speaks in vibration, in feeling, in knowing. That flicker in your gut, that spark behind your eyes when something feels right for no reason. That moment of resonance when a truth is spoken, and your entire body says, yes. That's your frequency, that's the signal beneath the noise, and it's always been there, quietly humming behind the static of your conditioning. To wake up is to realign with that signal, to make choices not from fear, but from resonance, to walk toward what lights you up, even if it makes no logical sense, to honor what you feel over what you were taught to believe. That's not rebellion, that's remembrance. You're not becoming someone new, you're peeling away everything that isn't you. And once you begin to live from your soul frequency, the loop starts to dissolve. The people who once triggered you no longer have power over you. The patterns that once entrapped you begin to lose their hold. Because you're no longer feeding them, you're no longer vibrating at their level. You've stepped out of the echo chamber and into the field of your true self. And from that space, everything shifts. But the loop doesn't go quietly. It will test your awakening. It will try to pull you back through familiarity, through comfort, through the seductive gravity of your old identity. That's why breathwork and stillness aren't just practices, they're lifelines. You'll need them when the world starts to pull at you again. You'll need them when doubt returns, when fear rises, when the veil thickens. Because it will. That's the nature of the afterlife realm you're in. It's layered, elastic, designed to stretch you just far enough to grow, but not so far that you break. You are being trained through resistance. Your soul is being sharpened through contrast, not to suffer, but to awaken with power. Because only a soul that has earned its awakening can carry it into the next realm without collapsing under its weight. The good news is, every act of presence deepens your lucidity. Every moment you choose stillness over reaction rewrites the code. Every time you breathe and feel instead of flee, the loop weakens. And eventually, it breaks. Not all at once, but in pieces. You'll wake up in flashes, in conversations that feel too orchestrated to be random, in dreams that bleed into waking life, in the way time bends when you follow your truth. These are signs, markers, cracks in the simulation. But here's the most powerful truth of all. You don't escape the loop by fighting it. You escape by seeing it. By understanding that everything inside it is symbolic. That the people, the struggles, the emotional pain are all mirrors. The more you decode, the more you transcend. You were never meant to destroy the illusion. You were meant to see through it, to walk within it with open eyes and a steady soul. And, once you do, you begin to create. Not react. Not survive. But create. From soul. From intention. From alignment. You begin to live lucidly, to speak as consciousness, to move as vibration, to love as frequency. You no longer ask life to change for you. You become the change. You carry the new pattern. You ripple it into the field. And that's when you know you've broken the cycle. Not because life is perfect, but because you are no longer bound by it. You came here to wake up inside the afterlife, to remember that this is not final reality. This is a reflection, a rehearsal, a dream that teaches. And your mission isn't to escape the dream, but to awaken within it. To bring awareness into the pattern. To anchor truth in a place where forgetting has ruled for far too long. You have everything you need. The breath, the silence, the intuition, the signals. It's already within you. All you have to do is remember to remember. Because the moment you see the loop, you're no longer trapped in it. And when you're no longer trapped, you're free to write a new script. One that doesn't start from survival, but from sovereignty. One that doesn't revolve around fear, but radiates from love. You're not just here to wake up, you're here to help others do the same. What if I told you that the moment you realize you're already dead is the moment you truly begin to live? Not dead in the way the world defines it, not the absence of heartbeat or breath, but dead to the illusion, dead to the masks, the roles, the fear-based stories that once held you hostage. That kind of death is not an ending. It's a return, a re-entry into truth. It's the quiet collapse of the false world you've been taught to believe in, the dream falling away so that the dreamer can finally awaken. When you begin to understand that this reality is a projection, a simulation inside the afterlife, then death stops being a line you cross and becomes something much more profound. It becomes integration. Not a falling away, but a merging. You don't leave this world, you reabsorb it. You don't disappear, you dissolve the illusion of separation. Most people live terrified of death because they believe it is the end. But what if it's not? What if death is just the soft curtain falling at the end of one scene before the next begins? What if you're not moving toward death, but through it, again and again, in 1,000 subtle ways? And what if you've already crossed the threshold without even knowing it? Think about it. The way time bends in dreams. The way memories flicker like scenes from a play you're both watching and acting in. The way life often feels more like a loop than a line. These are not glitches. They are signals, and when the realization finally hits you, that you're not waiting to die, but remembering that you already have, everything changes. Suddenly, fear evaporates. The fear of failure, of judgment, of being seen too clearly, or not seen at all, it dissolves. Because now, you're living from the other side. You're no longer playing the game from within the game. You're watching it unfold with clarity, with depth, with compassion. This is the death of the ego, the identity that believed it was the center of the story. This is the death of separation, the illusion that you are a skin-bound self walking through a hostile world. When you realize you are already dead, you stop trying to survive and start choosing to be fully alive, and not in the grasping, striving way the world rewards, but in the expansive, surrendered way the soul remembers. Death, in this way, becomes a teacher. Not the end, but the opening. It teaches you that nothing is truly lost, that energy is never destroyed, that the version of you who believed in limits was never who you really were. And as you begin to live from this knowing, your reality rearranges itself. You start to see beauty in the small things, the way sunlight hits a leaf, the warmth in a stranger's smile, the sacred rhythm of your breath. You start to notice synchronicities not as cute coincidences, but as sacred affirmations. You stop needing to be right. You stop needing to win. You stop needing to prove anything to anyone. Because from the other side, none of that matters. What matters is presence. What matters is connection. What matters is how deeply you love. And here's the paradox. By realizing you are already dead, you finally feel safe enough to live. Truly live, boldly, freely, authentically. You begin to speak your truth without apology. You begin to create without permission. You begin to love without fear of loss, because you've already let go of the illusion of permanence. You've already died to the lie that anything here is forever, and in doing so, you become untouchable. Not in an arrogant way, but in a deeply peaceful way. You know who you are now. You're the observer behind the dream, the awareness moving through form, the soul that chose this experience not to escape death, but to awaken through it. You begin to meet others differently too. You see the light behind their eyes, even when they don't. You recognize the soul under the pain. You stop judging their path because you know they're walking through their own version of the dream, and they too are being led back to remembrance. Whether they know it or not, this understanding doesn't make you passive. It makes you present. It doesn't make you indifferent. It makes you infinitely compassionate. Because now, you see the whole system for what it is, a beautiful, complex illusion designed not to imprison you, but to trigger your awakening. When you live like this, you become a mirror for others. Your peace becomes magnetic. Your presence becomes medicine. You're not trying to wake anyone up. Your beingness is the awakening. People feel it before they understand it. They soften around you. They begin to question their own illusions. And in that space, healing begins. So what happens when you realize you're already dead? You stop resisting. You stop running. You stop clinging to what was never meant to last. And instead, you step fully into the only thing that ever was. Now, this moment, this breath, this sacred sliver of experience happening right here, right now. You stop chasing the next thing and start honoring this thing. You no longer wait for a sign to begin, you realize you are the sign. You no longer fear the unknown. You remember, you are the unknown, tasting itself through human form. There is nothing to fear anymore, because there is nothing to lose. You already let go the moment you saw through the veil. And now, everything becomes a gift. Every interaction, every challenge, every quiet moment alone with your own thoughts. It's all part of the remembering. This is the final revelation. Not that death awaits you, but that you have already walked through it. And now, you get to live from the other side. Not in mourning, but in celebration. Not in fear, but in awe. Not in waiting, but in wonder. You are not here to die. You are here because you already did. And this mysterious, beautiful, chaotic experience is the afterglow of a soul who has dared to come back, to remember, to awaken, and to bring light into the dream. So live accordingly, love boldly, speak truthfully, and walk through this illusion with the sacred confidence of someone who has already touched eternity, because you have, and you always will.